flowers as the last of the mourners dispersed from the cemetery. A crescent moon hung low in the sky, its pale light casting long, eerie shadows over the uneven rows of headstones. Beneath the freshly turned earth, in a casket of polished mahogany, Daniel Croft lay motionless. His life had ended abruptly, a car crash on a rain-slick highway snuffing out his existence in a violent instant. Now, as darkness descended upon the graveyard, he faced a new reality, a nightmarish journey beyond the veil of life. But death, as Daniel was about to discover, was not the end dot, it was merely the beginning. The first sensation was one of suffocating pressure. His thoughts were a fragmented mosaic of confusion and fear. Panic clawed at him as he tried to sit up, only to feel his forehead press against something solid, a smooth, cold surface. His arms, too, were pinned tightly to his sides. It was then that realization struck with the force of a sledgehammer. I'm in a coffin. Daniel's breathing quickened, though the stale air offered little relief. His screams were swallowed by the heavy wooden lid, reducing them to muffled, impotent cries. This wasn't supposed to happen. He remembered the paramedics, the cold efficiency of the hospital staff. They had declared him dead. He had heard them, but he hadn't been dead. Not truly. Hours passed, though in the pitch-black confines of his tomb, time had lost all meaning. The oppressive silence was broken only by the sound of his own ragged breathing and the erratic thudding of his heart. Then, as he hovered on the edge of despair, Daniel heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible sound. They slithered through the darkness, weaving through the layers of earth with a malevolent curiosity. At first, he thought it was his mind unraveling under the strain of isolation. But the voices grew louder, more distinct, carrying with them a chilling familiarity. "Daniel!" one voice hissed, a spectral echo of his mother's tone, though she had been dead for years. "You've come to join us," another voice crooned, thick with sinister glee. It was the voice of his childhood friend Liam, who had drowned in a lake when they were 12. No, this isn't real," Daniel muttered, shaking his head, but the whispers only laughed, a cacophony of ghostly mirth that gnawed at his sanity. The soil around him seemed to shift, loosening its grip on the coffin. Tendrils of black earth snaked through the tiny gaps in the wood, caressing his skin like cold, skeletal fingers. The dead were calling to him, beckoning him to join their eternal congregation beneath the ground. Daniel's torment escalated as the whispers gave way to more tangible horrors. The first came in the form of scratching, a soft, persistent noise like claws raking against the outside of the coffin. It circled him, methodical and deliberate, as though something was testing the integrity of his wooden prison. "Who's there?" Daniel gasped, his voice barely a whisper. The scratching ceased, replaced by a low, guttural growl. It was not human, nor was it an animal he could recognize. The growl reverberated through the coffin, vibrating his very bones, and then came the knocking. It was rhythmic, purposeful. Something or someone was knocking from the outside, seeking entry. Daniel recoiled, pressing himself as far back as the confines allowed. "Leave me alone!" He screamed, his voice cracking with terror. But the knocking persisted, growing more forceful with each repetition. Suddenly, the lid of the coffin began to splinter. Cracks spiderwebbed across the wood, and Daniel could see faint glimmers of movement beyond. A writhing mass of hands, their flesh rotted and discolored, clawing their way toward him. The smell of decay filled the coffin, making him gag. The lid gave way with a final deafening crack, and the hands surged in, pulling at him with relentless strength. Their touch was cold and slimy, their grip unyielding. Daniel fought against them, but it was futile. The dead were legion, and they would not be denied. Dragged from his shattered coffin, Daniel found himself in a cavernous expanse beneath the graveyard. The air was thick with the stench of rot and sulfur, and the walls pulsed with a sickly organic glow. The ground beneath his feet was soft and spongy, like flesh stretched over bone. The dead surrounded him, an assembly of decayed and desiccated forms. Their eyes, hollow and lifeless, fixed on him with predatory intent. Yet it was not their appearance that terrified him most, but the hunger that radiated from them. A hunger for the living. A figure stepped forward from the throng, its face a grotesque mask of desiccated skin stretched tightly over a skeletal frame. Its eyes burned with an unnatural light. "Welcome, Daniel," it rasped, its voice like dry leaves in the wind. "You have crossed the threshold. Here, beneath the soil, we are many, and now you are one of us." "No," Daniel whispered, shaking his head. "This isn't real. It can't be real." The figure's skeletal grin widened. "Reality is a fragile thing. In life, you were blind to the truth. But in death, all is revealed." The dead began to chant, their voices rising in a chilling chorus. The sound resonated through the cavern, a dirge that seemed to seep into Daniel's very soul. The figure raised its bony hands, and the ground opened beneath Daniel, a yawning chasm that pulsed with a dark, malevolent energy. "No, I won't go!" Daniel screamed, but the hands of the dead held him fast, dragging him toward the abyss. As Daniel was pulled into the chasm, the world around him dissolved into a maelstrom of shadows and whispers. He felt himself falling, weightless, through an infinite void. The whispers grew louder, their voices blending into a deafening cacophony of despair and madness. Images flashed before his eyes, memories of his life, moments of joy and sorrow, now tainted by the knowledge of his impending fate. He saw his own death replayed in vivid detail, the crash, the impact, and the darkness that followed. But now he saw more. He saw the shadowy figure that had been waiting for him, lurking just beyond the veil of life. The figure spoke, its voice a deep, guttural rumble dot. "You were chosen, Daniel. Chosen to bear witness to the truth of existence. There is no escape, no salvation. Only the endless night." As the last vestiges of light faded, Daniel felt his soul being consumed by the darkness. He was no longer a man, no longer an individual. He was a part of the void, an eternal fragment of the collective despair that resided beneath the world. In the quiet cemetery, the world above carried on oblivious. The wind rustled through the trees, and the moon cast its pale light over the gravestones. Daniel's grave lay undisturbed, a simple marker among many. But beneath the soil, in the lightless depths, a new voice joined the chorus of the dead. The first night in the grave had come and gone, but for Daniel, the nightmare had only just begun. Eternity stretched before him, an unbroken expanse of darkness and torment. In life, he had feared death. In death, he learned to fear something far worse. For the grave is not a place of rest. It is a doorway, and once opened, it can never be closed. If this chilling tale kept you on the edge of your seat, imagine what other horrors await. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to never miss a spine-tingling story. Share this video with someone who loves a good scare, and let us know in the comments. What would you do if you woke up in a coffin? Your darkest fears might just inspire our next story.